Going through a divorce is, to put it mildly, incredibly stressful. And on top of all the emotional stuff, you have to deal with the finances, which can feel just as overwhelming. One of the biggest questions is always about the house. What is it really worth? Getting a clear professional answer is absolutely critical. But then the next question is, what's that going to cost? Well, let's dive in and create a super clear budgeting guide for a divorce appraisal right here in Pinehurst. All right, let's cut right to the chase. This is the big question, isn't it? You need a number so you can plan, so you can budget, so let's get straight to it. And there you have it. For a typical single-family home here in the Pinehurst area, you should be planning to budget somewhere in the range of $550 to $650. This is for the 2025 to 2026 timeframe. But look, this isn't just some number I pulled out of thin air. It's actually based on a really solid benchmark that gives us a realistic place to start. So now that you have that number in your head, let's kind of pull back the curtain a little bit and see exactly where it comes from. To really understand this cost, we need to look at the foundation that appraisers use to build their pricing. So is this price just whatever the market will bear, what an appraiser feels like charging that day? No, not at all, actually. There's a much more structured starting point that helps everybody establish a fair price for this kind of work. The whole foundation is something called the VA fee schedule. Now, technically, it's a government price list for appraisals on VA loans, but in reality, it's become the most reliable baseline for what appraisal work costs across the entire state. You can think of it like the industry's official starting price list. Okay, now here is a really, really crucial detail. Pinehurst is technically in what's called a high-demand county, and that category has a higher official fee on the schedule. But, and this is important, for a private divorce appraisal, we actually use the standard non-high-demand fee as our baseline. Why? Because it gives us a much more accurate market estimate, not one that's inflated just because of high mortgage volume in the area. So using that standard baseline, here are the actual numbers we start with. A single-family home or a condo, they both start at a base fee of $525. A manufactured home that's a little more complex, it starts at $575. And a small multifamily property like a duplex starts at $625. These are our foundational numbers. So you've probably already done the math in your head. You noticed that baseline fee of $525 is lower than the $550 to $650 range I gave you at the beginning. And there is a very, very specific reason for that gap. Let's call it the divorce premium. So why the extra cost? If the baseline is $525, why do you need to budget for more? It really comes down to two simple things: a lot of extra work and, frankly, much, much higher stakes. See, a divorce appraisal isn't just a form for a bank. It is a legal document. It has to be tough enough to stand up to scrutiny in a legal setting. That means a more detailed report, being prepared for potential court testimony, a lot more back and forth with attorneys, and sometimes doing this really complex analysis of what the property was worth on a date in the past, like your date of separation. All of that adds a ton of time and liability for the appraiser. And here is where it all comes together visually. We take that VA baseline fee we talked about, and then we add that premium for all the extra divorce-related work. So for a single-family home, that takes us from the $525 baseline right up into our target budget range of $550 to $650. And as you can see, the exact same logic applies to condos, manufactured homes, and multifamily properties. Okay, so we have our typical range nailed down. But let's be honest, your situation might not be typical. So now let's look at the key factors that can push your final price toward the higher end of that range, or maybe even a little bit beyond it. First up, and this one's pretty obvious, is property complexity. I mean, think about it. Appraising a standard 3-bedroom home in a subdivision is one thing. Appraising a totally custom-built home right on a golf course with unique features, or maybe multiple buildings on the property, that takes way more analysis. And of course, that extra work is going to be reflected in the fee. Next up is the valuation date. Sometimes your attorneys might need to know the home's value on the day you separated. We call that a retrospective value. So if you need that in addition to its current value today, well, that's basically 2 different valuation analyses rolled into one report. That will almost always increase the final cost. The level of legal involvement also really matters. If an appraiser has to start preparing for court testimony or spend a significant amount of time on calls and emails with attorneys, those services often fall under a separate litigation charge, which gets added to the total fee. And finally, timing is everything, right? A standard appraisal usually takes about 7 business days to complete properly.
If you need a report turned around in just a couple of days to meet a court deadline, well, just like anything else in life, that rush order is almost certainly going to come with a premium fee.
So let's just boil this all down and bring it back to the most important takeaway. For your financial planning, for your budget, a really reasonable expectation for a straightforward home appraisal in Pinehurst is right back where we started. Plan on the mid 500s to the mid 600s. So there you have it. You now have the tools to estimate your cost. You understand the baseline, you know why there's a premium for divorce work, and you know the factors that can change that final price. So really the only question left is, what are the unique details of your property and your case that will fit into that framework?